Griffin. It's great to be back with everybody again. We're looking forward to a great day of knowledge sharing. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Marguerite Griffin's a Senior Vice President at the Northern Trust Company. As National Director of Philanthropic Services, Marguerite is responsible for the delivery and growth of Northern's philanthropic services to wealth management clients. She specializes in administering charitable trusts, private foundations, and other tax-exempt entities, and counsels clients regarding charitable giving strategies, nonprofit compliance and risk management, family succession planning, microfinance, and international philanthropy. And what do you do in your free time? Previously, she was a senior trust administrator and relationship manager, where she was responsible for the administration of large, complex trusts for individuals and families. Her duties involve working with sophisticated estate plans, sensitive family situations, and complex property transfers. Marguerite received a BA degree from Washington University in St. Louis and a JD degree from Northwestern University School of Law. She's a member of the Chicago Bar Association and the Chicago Estate Planning Council. Marguerite is also admitted to practice before the Illinois Supreme Court. She's an active volunteer, advisor, and board member with several civic and cultural institutions throughout the greater Chicago area. Please join me in welcoming Marguerite Griffin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the future. From the perspective of what we see our high net worth clients focusing on. And in many cases, they will share with their wealth advisor or their philanthropic advisor, as I am, what they like and love and maybe aren't so thrilled about the gift planners that they're working with. And so that's the information that I want to share with you, certain trends that I'm seeing that I believe will affect how we think about philanthropy in the future, again, from the perspective of a philanthropic advisor. But I want to start by talking about the present. Normally when you have a guest speaker, they come in and they'll tell a joke, but I'm not great at them. Usually I give you the punchline before I actually get the joke out, which I've actually already done. So I want to just speak to you about some things one thing that is just simply thrilling to me, that is really focused on the present. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Alex Hanhold. He is a rock climber, 31 years old, and probably the most skilled and excellent rock climber there is and ever has been. And on June 3rd, he scaled El Capitan, which is in Yosemite National Park. Is anyone familiar with that? It is a wall of sheer granite. And he scaled this as a free solo climber. And that means he climbed it alone without any ropes, only his fingertips and his feet. I would encourage you to go out and look on a National Geographic site or anywhere and check this gentleman out. And there's some videos of previous climbs that he's had. But this, for me, when I think about the present, is an extreme example of what it means to live in the present. Because if he'd made a mistake, he would fall and that would be the end of him. Really pleasant thought, I know, right? But just thinking about being in the present. And then my joke. So imagine the Dalai Lama has given you a gift. And he says to you, I want to give you a gift, and you want to hide it somewhere where no one else can find it. Where would you hide it? Well, the Dalai Lama would say, in the present. Because no one really or rarely stays there and they won't find it. So that was supposed to be comical. See? I'm going to stick with my book reviews and talking to you about other things. So the future of philanthropy. Let me find the clicker. I want to talk first about what I'm calling the new philanthropists. And this is sort of the state of where philanthropy is from an advisor's perspective since, I'd say, 2008, 2010. I also want to talk about millennials because they really are the future of philanthropy, and they think very differently from their parents and grandparents about how to use financial resources and dollars that are earmarked for charitable benefit. I want to talk about certain trends and the different types of giving vehicles that are being used. And then I want to talk about technology, transparency, and social media and how all of those things are shaping how families are engaging in philanthropy and how they look to engage going forward. Social impact investing, very important. And then philanthropy outside of tax-exempt models. Many of the clients that we work with and that you are working with, in some cases, the tax benefits are not what's driving them, and they are considering other types of charitable giving or giving vehicles where they can do good, but are not necessarily tied to our tax scheme. And then a few takeaways, key pointers for all of the gift planners. Now, tell me, how many attorneys are out there? Because I want to make sure that I'm not being too offensive. Yes, okay. So I will watch my comments as it relates to the legal professions. So the new philanthropists, they are essentially or have redefined mission statements and vision statements. They're becoming much more focused in what they want or what they want to support. In the 90s and early 2000s, many families and individuals, their portfolios were looking very good, and they said, we're going to give to these 5 organizations within our mission, but we also are interested in saving the beluga whales, and we're also interested in making sure that there's wild habitat for coyotes. So we're going to give money to those organizations that's supporting those causes. That has really come down to a really good focus. So we had mission drift, and now a lot of our families are getting back to mission. And that means their flexibility around the edges has really changed. And many times, like a nonprofit, a gift planner will say, well, how do you get families that are focused on one issue to focus on our issue? And my response always is, you usually don't. And I would say that's especially the case now. Individuals and families are using various different types of charitable giving vehicles at the same time. So they may have a private foundation, they may be using a donor advised fund. It's very important for you to ask the question, what vehicle are you going to use to make this gift? And when I'm speaking of this, and throughout this presentation, I want to be clear that I'm speaking mainly about present day gifts, gifts that are happening now, not necessarily testamentary gifts. And I'll try to be specific when I make that shift. So they're using various different charitable giving vehicles. They are also more willing now, and this is great for the nonprofit community in general, focusing on general operating expenses and multi-year gifts. They really are thinking about their charitable giving as being in partnership with the organizations. Equally, I'm finding that they want donor-designated contributions as well as anonymous giving. There's one example of a gift planner who had been working with one of our clients, and this gift planner knew that this person was very skittish about having his name out in lights. And he really was concerned that if the whole world knew that he could make $1 million gift, that he would be bombarded by solicitations. And so what she did, I thought, was really ingenious. She said, we would love for you to make a gift to our organization. Here's what I propose. We'd like to put you in as a $100,000 donor, and we'd like to include you in our newsletter because we think that that will encourage more gifts. But we also would consider, if you gave us another $900,000, we would put that in our newsletter as an anonymous gift. And the client actually wrote the check. So the point of all of that is to really understand how people feel about privacy when you're asking for a gift. Because in this case, it was fine for everyone to know that they could make a six-figure gift or five-figure gift, but not a six-figure gift, so, or seven-figure gift. So very important something to know about anonymous giving. Individuals are thinking about their charitable giving as investments. They think about a risk-return analysis. They think about their charitable giving in the same way that they think about their assets in their portfolios. So the language has changed. They talk about charitable investments. They talk about what is the risk of me giving this to this organization versus another, and what is the benefit that I will receive from that I will receive, and that also what is the social benefit. They want to work with other social investors or other individuals who are charitable. And so they're looking for funders. They're looking for ways that they can build alliances and partnerships with other funders. And to the extent that those funders together can make a difference that's greater than what they could do with their own funds, that's very important to them. And I believe that that presents an opportunity for gift planners to work to connect all of their donors with each other, that there is an opportunity for you to get even bigger gifts and more transformational gifts when those donors have access to each other. And then finally, they are using philanthropy to build connections with the next generation, and that are children and grandchildren. There is a real desire for, I'll say, boomers and older to connect with Gen X and millennials, to talk and really have them receive some street cred, essentially, by letting those younger family members know how engaged they are in the issues and the causes that are important to that younger generation. I'll give you an example. One family, there's a 12-year-old who's now working on her third documentary on water scarcity in Africa. And she has essentially changed how her family thinks about philanthropy, how her grandfather thinks about philanthropy. This is a family that was very focused on domestic giving, and now they're thinking about international giving. And the grandfather is excited to be able to support something that his granddaughter is really focused on. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of what I'm calling bottom-up philanthropy, where it's actually the younger generations that are influencing what the folks who have the pot of money or in control of that family wealth, what they're doing with those funds. Millennials. Now, I know some of you say, well, really, why should we be focused on them? They really aren't the ones with the cash right now. But I think it's very important, and I'm just going to speak of about 2 points on this slide. One of the main reasons millennials matter is that they will affect how you message the work that you're doing and how you talk about your organization. Millennials in general are less concerned about the institution and more concerned about the missions or the causes. They are less concerned that your organization has been around for 100 years. They're more concerned about how your organization is going to adapt to the next 100 years. And then I want to talk about this word we use a lot in the nonprofit community, sustainable. There is a slight shift in what sustainability means to millennials, because for us, perhaps, sustainability means we want to be able to have the capacity to continue to support and to continue to have resources to support those missions and causes that the organization has always been engaged with. Millennials, however, see sustainability as how willing and able is this organization to evolution? How are they able to evolve to suit changing circumstances? And maybe this organization should not exist in its current form. Maybe it should be able to evolve, and that's what we're going to support. We're going to support the re-engineering, the evolving of this organization, because the community has changed, their relevance in the community has changed, or we have an even bigger issue to work on. So sustainability means something different than I think the way we normally think of it. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about this concept of community. And for many organizations that are steeped in community, for millennials, community could mean the entire planet. And so I think when you're talking to younger folks and their parents, it's important for you to define or to ask the question, how do they define community? Because you might not be talking the same language. They may not be thinking about the place where they grew up. And sometimes when the wealth holders have made money in the community, they are talking about the place where the business was, the place where they raised their family. Not so with millennials. So, a few shifting paradigms and trends. We have traditional philanthropy, which we're all familiar with. We have bequests, testamentary gifts, the use of split interest trusts, private foundations, and the role of community foundations to provide information to individuals and to help individuals learn about what's going on in the community. And then we have those big box charities. I'm speaking of like the American Red Cross or the Salvation Army, where in the past we can always depend on them to be there when we needed them to be and to offer information about ways that individuals can get involved in the community. We've moved to individual philanthropy, and that has really been spurred by donor advised funds. And I want to just give this tip about donor advised funds, and this is something that many gift planners may not be aware of. But some of the donor advised funds, the ones that are not captive donor advised funds, so these are the ones that are outside of a university or a hospital sponsorship. Vanguard, Fidelity, Northern Trust has a donor advised fund. There is a portion, or there's a section of the agreement that says, name your remainder charitable beneficiary. Meaning we understand that while you're the advisor, you're going to be making decisions. But if there are no more advisors, or if you're no longer able to do this, who do you want to receive the balance of what's in your donor advised fund account? 95% of the agreements that are signed, those individuals have not named a remainder beneficiary. And so I think there's a real opportunity for gift planners, even if that individual says, you know, well, I'm giving you as much as I can right now. Ask the question, have you named a charitable remainder in your donor advised fund? And if not, we'd like for you to consider naming our organization as your charitable beneficiary. Again, that's something that you probably wouldn't even think of, but I see it as a way that donor advised funds actually are becoming like bequest entities or accounts, whereas normally they would leave money to a charitable remainder beneficiary in their wills. There's big opportunity to make that same designation, but through the donor advised fund. And right now I'm finding that there are more individuals who are looking to donor advised funds to think about those gifts after death, meaning the ones that their family members may control, than they are thinking about including bequests in their wills or their trusts. The 4 T's of philanthropy, something that's very important, again, for lifetime giving, making sure that there are opportunities for people to volunteer for your organization, that you're giving them opportunities for them to share their ties, their networks. It's one of the 4 T's with you. And making connections that way. So it's not just about their treasure, it's not just about time, volunteering, but that is very important, especially now where we have so many individuals who are retiring and looking for opportunities. Price philanthropy is becoming very popular. So this would probably fall closest to the category of those individuals who are interested in scholarships. And so these are an individual naming a certain or looking for some outcome And they are going to set up funds or set aside funds specifically for that outcome, whether it is a music competition, whether it is a competition for engineering students, et cetera. But we're finding a lot of our clients are thinking about prize philanthropy. And these are essentially endowed funds, so they are willing to commit to this prize for a number of years. And then social impact investing, this whole notion of, I want to do good, but I also want to do well for myself. We've moved to citizen philanthropy, and this is something that the internet has brought us with social media giving and peer-to-peer giving that you can do on the internet. Funding collaboratives and giving circles, also very important. And these are giving circles that are your peers, your friends, and your family, but they also can be your work colleagues. And this, again, is another opportunity for gift planners to say, we're going to build a giving circle. We're going to create a community of givers that are all tied to our organization. And we're going to create something that when we're talking to a single donor, they can direct their colleagues or their friends to our organization through the giving circle. This is an opportunity, again, because the high net worth donor is thinking about not just their own giving, but how they can be identified as a generous donor amongst their colleagues and their community. Diaspora giving is very important. As the United States, we're a group of immigrants, most of us, and those individuals who have come from countries, say, in the last 50 years, they are also thinking about, how do I give back to those countries where my family came from, where I came from? So diaspora giving is also a trend that we're seeing become much more popular. And then public policy and advocacy has truly become a part of the overall charitable assets or charitable investment portfolio. So individuals want to give to an organization, let's say the issue is homelessness, but they're also willing to support public policy and advocacy initiatives. And I think it behooves an organization, if it is, for example, a social policy or something, or a social issue or something that is affected by legislation or public policy, to the extent that you're making a statement that you're doing something to try to change the conditions for which this issue has become so critical, is very important. Technology and transparency. I'll just talk briefly. I've given you a list of organizations that, under the 3 topics of technology, that are really shaping how we think about fundraising and raising funds. Giving Tuesday, again, is a fairly new phenomenon, but it has been very popular in bringing awareness to the opportunities that individuals have to give. All of the organizations under technology really are shaping how we think about exchanging information, raising funds, building awareness. I want to talk a bit about Patients Like Me. Now, this is a patient network, and it's a real-time research platform. And what happens is individuals who are suffering from some type of illness or medical condition can go online and tell their story about their condition, treatments that they're having. Other individuals who have similar medical backgrounds can go there to find information about what to expect, what are the side effects of certain types of medications. Is it a way to track different experiences, and it is also informing the medical and pharmaceutical community about what is working and how different patients, how different individuals are affected by the medications they're receiving. It's also very empowering for individuals, and many of these individuals have terminal illnesses, to be a part of a community. Transparency. The organizations that I've included there, the 4 there, really have done a lot to bring to the forefront what's really happening within an organization, or how you can reach out to directly affect a single individual. And many of these organizations, Charity Water, Donors Choose, Kiva, they're all about what I find philanthropists are interested in. I want to know what kind of impact I'm having. So they all will provide to their donors, here's how you've changed the life of this individual. And then crowdfunding and social media opportunities. Miracle Messages. How many of you are familiar with this organization? Just a few of you. Yes, Chris back in the back. Yes, so this is an organization that provides opportunities for people who are homeless to record videos of themselves. And then Miracle Messages uses the internet to connect that homeless person with friends and loved ones that they may have lost touch with. Their ultimate goal is to reunite over 1 million homeless people with their families, I think by the year 2020. And they've really made tremendous effect. So this is a crowdfunding social media technology platform that has really changed how we connect with each other, and that will continue. Generosity, again, it's an online platform for raising funds, for starting your own campaign. And you can begin a campaign for yourself or for someone else just by a click of a button. So technology, the speed of which we're able to have access to funds, and it might be short-term funds, it might be just for the life of that issue at that time, but it's a way that you are able to really rally individuals around your causes and also help to raise funds so that you can at least begin seeding certain projects or seeding certain causes that need financial support. So, speaking about social impact investing, I spend a lot of time talking with clients about this whole intersection between philanthropy and financial return. That middle ground is where social impact investing falls. And you may know of it in various different ways. You may know it as philanthrocapitalism, mission investing, responsible investing, although I'm not sure we're going to continue using that because I had one client say to me, so have I not been responsible until now? So we might not use the responsibility. ESG investing or ESG integration, all of this is falling within this place between maximizing financial return, maximizing charitable return. And so I actually want to skip this slide. I'm going to come back to it and show you this way. This is probably the best teaching tool that I have to understand impact investing. On the far right, you have traditional philanthropy. The gift is aimed at creating some type of social benefit with no expectation for financial return. On the far left, you have traditional investments where you're really just giving without any focus on environmental, social, governance issues. You're investing to make as much money as possible. And in between all of that, you have what's considered negative screening. This is usually called socially responsible investing, and that's when you are taking certain assets out of your portfolio because they are damaging to the environment or to some social issue. You have ESG integration, which is more of a positive screening where you're actually identifying companies that are contributing in a positive way to the environment, to social issues, and that have a very good governance structure. You have thematic investing where individuals are focused on, for example, clean energy. They want a better environment, and they're going to fund for-profit organizations that are working to clean up the environment. And then impact investing, which falls closest, I believe, to traditional philanthropy, and between thematic investing, where you have individuals who are focused on certain specific projects, let's say affordable housing, and they are looking to use various different giving vehicles or for-profit vehicles to have a social impact. And again, many of the times when they are making these investments, they are not being made into tax-exempt entities. So social impact investing, these are investments into for-profit companies for the most part, with the intention to generate social and environment impact alongside financial return. There are individuals who are involved in impact investing. There are private foundations, mutual funds, pension funds now, community foundations, and community development finance institutions, which I find is an entry point for many of our clients who are interested in social impact investing. So, how many people know who this is? Again, this is kind of that thing of, giving away the punchline. I probably should have a slide that doesn't have the Ben & Jerry's truck behind them, and then have you ask who these individuals are. So Ben & Jerry's, the company, was the first benefit corporation. How many of you are familiar with benefit corporations? Right. So some that you might be familiar with, Method, I think you find that in Target. Patagonia. I gave a similar talk specifically on impact investing in Miami, and I mentioned Patagonia, and they were just blank stares. And I says, oh, you all don't need fleece, right? So I know, being in Michigan, you know who Patagonia is, right? So these are all benefit corporations. And these are corporations where it's actually legally written into their charter that they can consider, in addition to share profit returns or profit for the shareholders, social benefits. And they can outline what those social benefits are. So Patagonia, a portion of their profits goes to protecting the environment. It's a part of their charter. So what it does is it insulates, or it provides limited liability to their directors for them to reinvest some of their profits in projects that are supporting the environment. And they do this specifically in Central America. They're trying to protect the rainforests in Central and South America. But this is a trend that we're seeing when we talk about philanthropy outside of tax-exempt models. Now, program-related investments, you all may be familiar with that. That's what private foundations can do by law, where they can consider a portion of the amount that they have to distribute. It doesn't have to be a traditional gift. It can actually be a loan. And by doing that, they're able to build capacity for nonprofit organizations, or they can do a loan guarantee. Back in 2008, 2009, there were a lot of nonprofits that really couldn't get credit, and so they were looking for private foundations to provide that loan guarantee so that they could get credit, so that they could keep their doors open, keep their operations going. So essentially, impact investing has been around since the '69 Act, which really started private foundations. But what we're finding now are a number of different types of ways that individuals can do good and do well at the same time. Social impact bonds. It's a wonderful connection where you're bringing the nonprofit community, the government, and the for-profit community together to fund certain issues, certain causes, certain things that are very important that in the past the government and the nonprofit sector were responsible for supporting. And many projects really didn't get funded because of the lack of resources, the lack of nonprofit resources. Social impact investing actually brings the resources of the for-profit community to issues that have been limited in their support by only nonprofit dollars. Shareholder engagement has become much more popular, and it is a way that individuals who have large financial, does anyone have a glass of water? Thank you. Large financial portfolios, can begin to say, their philosophy is, it's better for me to be on the inside with some of these for-profit companies and change what their practices are, where they're sourcing their raw materials, how they're treating their workers. I'm concerned about these issues, and I'm going to be active as a shareholder. Social enterprises are these types of organizations that look like a nonprofit, but they also are for-profit. They're kind of a hybrid. And how these social enterprises are organized are like hybrid charities, the ones that I mentioned, a benefit corporation or an L3C. So everyone knows who those two individuals are? Yes? Who doesn't? You can close your eyes and we won't embarrass you. Yeah? So this is Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan. And when they decided that they were going to give back, thank you so much, they were going to give majority of their wealth away, everyone kind of expected that they were going to consider starting a private foundation, but they didn't. And I would say that this is something, again, when you think about the future of philanthropy, this is something that many individuals are thinking about. And it's really based on what they can do by keeping control over those assets and the types of ways that they're going to be able to invest in social good. So I want to read kind of the mission of the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. One reason is I think it's by far, and I've read many, many mission statements, I think it is by far the best mission statement that I have heard in a really long time. We want every child to grow up in a better world. Our goals for the future center on two ideas: advancing human potential and promoting equal opportunity. We are starting with science and education, areas in which systemic barriers limit individual progress. We make long-term investments because important breakthroughs often take decades or even centuries. This is a very clear purpose for the Chan Zuckerberg mission. And when they did it again, as I mentioned, they started a stir. They spent a lot of time with their advisors talking about the different ways to give. And what they came up with was an LLC corporation that they put the Facebook shares in. They also have a small foundation. And to the extent that they can attract other investors and make an investment in a for-profit entity that can be scaled and can have a really big effect on the social benefit of a community or communities, that's really what they're looking for. And so it's important to know that in many cases, your donors, when they think about giving, tax planning may not be a key motivator for them, especially for millennials. So it's important that you understand the pros and cons of business entities and how those can be used to create social benefit, and tax-exempt entities. Understanding that pursuing profit and social objective may be preferred because it allows for greater control. And then some of the things that, say, a private foundation does not allow the foundation manager to do, like participate in advocacy in a way that might include speaking specifically about a specific piece of legislation, that's something that, again, has become a part of this overall portfolio. I want to affect change in this area, and I want to do it by making charitable contributions, by making for-profit investments, by participating in advocacy. So, few points, and I'd like to leave some time if you have some questions or comments. Few takeaways. Mergers in the nonprofit sector. Now, we saw a bit of this, especially with social service organizations that began to merge their back office facilities where payroll, accounting, all of those things, they came together. This happened in Chicago, where they came together and said, you know, we're paying for the same services. Let's just our missions are different, but that function is something that we can combine and save costs. And the amount of savings that they were able to bring to their organizations has been significant. Now that's, or a certain group of social service organizations merging just one aspect of the work that they're doing. But I can tell you that probably not a meeting goes by where we don't have a client or a family of clients say, you know, we find the nonprofit community to be extremely inefficient. And these 5 organizations are doing similar work. We're not even sure if they're talking to each other. Do they know each other? There are more families now that are interested in funding the exercise of considering merger or considering ways that you can save costs. They're looking out and saying, you know, we really would like to fund what they're doing, but we've got 5 organizations. Let's make a grant to give them time and space to hire a consultant and to consider merging. This is something that I think will continue. I was just working with a billionaire in Texas. That's like all she's focused on, is trying to make sure that nonprofits are capable of scaling, but also that where there is a possibility for mergers, that's really what her foundation is trying to support. Giving While Living is still well in place, and I would say, you know, not to predict the future, but I would say that there are more individuals who are thinking about how can I make a difference now than thinking about leaving an endowment through their will or their trust, or leaving it to that next generation, which they're finding looks very different or thinks very different, and in many cases have said, those causes that are important to you may not be so important to us. So creating opportunities where individuals can be engaged with your organizations now, I'm finding that that's where the trend is. The global philanthropy industry, we can't keep our head in the sands about the fact that individuals, again, are thinking about community quite differently. And they're thinking about philanthropy on a global basis. I gave the example of the 12-year-old who went on a field trip and learned all about water scarcity. Now that is something that her family is considering. Impact investing and ESG strategies, again, to the extent that your organization has a social enterprise, or you're trying to find ways that you can create capacity for the organizations that you might be funding so that they can build scale and possibly create some type of profit, financial profit, very important. Next generation financial stewardship. Families and individuals are using their philanthropy to teach financial stewardship to the next generation. It's a very key part. We have a family education and governance group at Northern Trust, and they are very, very busy all around how can we teach our children how to manage money well. And so what's happening is these families are looking behind the curtain to make sure that the organizations that they are supporting are being good financial stewards as well. And then leadership development and succession planning. This is something that the whole nonprofit community is going to have to deal with. Many of our clients, the people that we work with, are on boards, and they bemoan constantly, well, this organization, the leadership succession plan is just not there, and we're concerned about what's going to happen when the current executive director leaves. There's no one there to take up that space. And I can tell you that millennials especially, you know, the whole idea that they would take less amount in pay so that they can have the opportunity to do social good does not fly with them, right? So a lot of the sacrifices and the commitment that many of the executive directors have now, where they're saying, you know, I'll forego a little bit of salary because I'm really concerned with the environment, or I'm really concerned with healthcare. Millennials think quite differently, and they're not willing to make that trade-off. So I'll end there and see if there are any questions. We've got about 6 minutes. Questions or comments? Yes, there's one woman there in the black sweater.
For your presentation. My question is, when you were talking about philanthropic funds and providing a final beneficiary, in the commercial donor advised funds, we call them philanthropic funds, like Fidelity, what happens if there isn't a beneficiary? Where does the money go? And the second question related to that is, do those funds provide for more than one generation of advisors?
Yes. So, so for Fidelity, I can't really speak of where the money goes with Fidelity, but here's what I know happens when there are community foundations that are the sponsoring charity for a donor advised fund. So if it is a community foundation, normally what they would do is that money becomes a part of that community foundation's assets. The money already is a part of the community foundation's assets, because by putting it in the donor advised fund, the donor's essentially given it away. Now, what I understand some community foundations will do is they will look to the organizations that the donor gave during their lifetime and try to mirror that. Or if they have some field of interest funds and they know this family is interested in education, they will do their best to stay true to that. Here's what's interesting about the succession. Donor advised funds have not been around long enough essentially for us to even get to the second generation. Most donor advised funds will last for 2 generations, the donor advisor, the first one, and then his or her children. At that point, technically, most donor advised funds should end when there are no more successor advisors. The question is, once we get to that place, will people terminate their donor advised funds, or will they write a donation, one check, and transfer it to another donor advised fund, thus adding a bit of perpetuity to those donor advised funds? That's the real question, and we just haven't gotten there yet to see what the trend will be.
Thank you. Thanks as well for your presentation. I was wondering, and I appreciate the references to millennials throughout the presentation. I wanted to dig a little deeper on that. Do you find that there's a certain profile of the millennials that you are working with, or that have that charitable intent that we could really look to in our communities as individuals who might have an interest in supporting some charities in our areas and things like that?
Yeah, I do, and maybe we can talk offline and I can give you a few things. I did a presentation to a group of millennials just to see if anything I said had any truth to it. And they agreed. First of all, they don't like you to generalize about them at all. But most of the things that I was saying are very true. So the thing that's most important, it's a difference in, is that we think of philanthropy, my generation and older, we think of philanthropy as being something that is separate from the rest of our lives. I mean, we kind of compartmentalize it when we think about our assets, when we think about our time, when we think about what we are doing with our lives. Millennials generally don't. Philanthropy and doing good is a part of their life. If you think about, not to get too esoteric, but if you think about different cultures and their notion of spirituality, it's like the rocks and the trees and everything around them has spirit in them. That's similar to how millennials think about philanthropy. So having it be something that they can't do as a part of raising their kids and going to school and going to work, that's something that I think the nonprofit community needs to really deal with. Now, I'll tell you, one nonprofit organization was trying to get millennials on the board. They were trying to get young people on the board. So they were talking about social media and Twitter, et cetera. Then they asked the question, how many of the board members actually use Twitter? And nobody raised their hand. And so they said, well, we can't really engage in social media if we don't even know how it works. And so they said, let's get some millennials on our board. But these millennials were saying, I've got to deal with daycare. Oh, and by the way, after work, I usually go to a yoga class. So what did this board do? They had free childcare and a yoga class before the board meeting, right? So they could get millennials to like spend their evening doing work that the millennials really wanted to do, but they see it all as being a part of their life, and they weren't going to sacrifice their kids or their yoga class for doing community service. But we can talk more about some of the specifics. Yes, one more question.
I'm in the context of a university major gifts, but we're looking at giving circles to engage a more diverse donor base. Do giving circles work for all age groups, millennials, or can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think giving circles can work for every age group, every cultural group. What's most important is that you're very keen to describing what it is they're going to be able to do. What it is that's motivating them to give. So it's just like having a case for support. A lot of times organizations will have a single case for support, which they're trying to reach out to every constituent group that they know of, everyone who could possibly give, and it ends up being just a lot of mush. It ends up being not persuasive, not passionate, because they're trying to squeeze everything in. Oh, this is going to be appealing to our group who's in this community. This is going to be appealing to the business community. I would suggest that you have more than one case for support. Maybe have 5. And that you target your message to the group that you're reaching out to. And I think giving circles work best when those giving circles, depending on the group you're trying to attract, may have a different messaging around it, or they may be giving to support the organization, but some specific aspect of the work that you're doing. That's how do you make giving circles work. Okay, thank you very much.